Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on any purchase over $10. See the description below for details. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and the Legends, and today we're going to look at the World Magic Cup results from last weekend. We'll be looking at the top 8 teams, what decks they brought to the table, and also some of those deck lists. Quickly before we get started though, just a fast reminder, if you check out the description below, you'll find a few ways to support the channel. Our Patreon page is down there. You're also going to find links to products on Amazon. And finally, Flipside Gaming still offering a promo code for our viewers. Hopefully you can save a little cash while you support us. But as always, thank you not only to the folks that use or look at those links, but to each and every one of you. Let's get into today's results. If you're not familiar with the World Magic Cup format, you're going to find teams of 3 playing 3 different standard decks. There are a few rounds of team sealed as well, so some of these decks maybe got pushed if they did really well in the limited portion, but for the most part, you're going to notice these are deck lists that you're familiar with and have been performing well for a while. Now, it doesn't list the countries here, so in case you're curious, I'll let you know what the top 8 countries were, and then we'll look at the decks. Number 8 was Slovakia, number 7 Australia, number 6 China, 5 Japan, 4 Italy, number 3 was Hong Kong, 2nd place Israel, and 1st place was France. So that France team, as you can see here, we're playing these 3 decks: Golgari Midrange, Jeskai Control, and Selesnya Tokens. 2nd place Israel, Golgari Midrange, Izzet Drakes, Boros Aggro. 3rd place Hong Kong, playing Golgari Midrange, Izzet Drakes, Boros Angels this time. 4th place Italy, Izzet Drakes, Golgari Midrange, and Selesnya Tokens. 5th place Japan, Izzet Drakes, Golgari Midrange, Selesnya Aggro. 6th place China, playing Golgari Midrange, Jeskai Control, Big Red, a lot of Golgari Midrange here. 7th place Australia, playing Bat Nexus, Boros Aggro, and Golgari Midrange. And in 8th place, finally, we have Slovakia playing Jeskai Control, Selesnya Tokens, and Golgari Midrange. So let's look at a few of these deck lists. We'll begin with the ones from the winning team. Golgari Midrange. Okay, we'll just look at one copy of this deck, even though there are differences if you look at some of the other copies. This particular one, just running 1 Doom Whisperer out of the sideboard. I mean, some of these decks have been running 2 or 3 in the main, but it does vary. Also, the Planeswalkers here, 1 Karn and 3 Vivians. You're seeing different numbers of these. Many of the decks are running 2 Karns, some are running 2 Vivians instead of 3. So again, there's a little bit of variance. And when it comes to the Vraskas, they are seeing less play at this point. Almost no play, as a matter of fact. Here's some of the key Guilds of Ravnica cards in this deck list: Midnight Reaper, Find and Finality, and Overgrown Tomb. Out of the sideboard, many of the cards that you see in some versions of this deck in the main: Doom Whisperer, Midnight Reaper, another copy, Plague Crafter, and Assassin's Trophy. Jeskai Control from the 1st place team, 1 copy of Rahl Izzet Viceroy right there in the main, 3 copies of Teferi in the main, and yeah, you're pretty familiar with this deck, I think, at this point. Although, a few cards that I haven't seen as often in these builds are creeping back in this particular one. Let's take a look at the Guilds cards and I'll point those out. In the main, Rahl Izzet Viceroy, like I said, Lava Coil, Deafening Clarion, Chemister's Insight, Ionize. I've seen less of that one recently, along with Expansion and Explosion. Sacred Foundry, Steam Vents will round this one out. In the sideboard, Legion Warboss, Niv Mizzet Heron, and 2 more copies of Lava Coil. Selesnya Tokens, the last deck from the winning team, and you know something, even though we're at the end of this meta, there's still some variance in these deck lists. However, Selesnya Tokens feels like such a solid build. We've looked at this deck the last 3 weeks, and I feel like the deck lists were almost identical week in and week out. And again, this one is not any different. 4 History of Benalius, 3 Legion's Landings, 4 Saproling Migrations, 2 Ajani's. Let's look at the cards from Guilds. I haven't had to change the slide in 3 weeks. Venerated Loxodon, Amarasol the Accord, Tristani Discordant, Flower and Flourish, March of the Multitudes, Conclave Tribunal, and Temple Garden. Out of the sideboard, Crawl Harpooner, Nullhide Ferox, and Knight of Autumn. Izzet Drakes is next as we look at the 2nd place team. Another really popular and successful deck. This variant not running any of the Phoenixes. We noticed that last week. There were some really successful versions of this build running Enigma Drake, but not Arclight Phoenix. This one follows suit, although there were other Izzet Drake decks in the top 8 that were running Arclight Phoenix. So both are still performing very well. And as you can imagine, you have your Drakes here, and beyond that, you're also going to find Niv Mizzet, which we'll look at in a second, and all those cheap spells. Dive Down, Opt, Shock. We've seen this one quite a bit by this point. From Guilds of Ravnica, we have Murmuring Mystic, Crackling Drake, Niv Mizzet Parent, Beacon Bolt, Lava Coil, Discovery and Dispersal, and Steam Vents. Out of the sideboard, Rahl is at Viceroy, another copy of Murmuring Mystic, another copy of Nib is at Perrin. Next is another deck from that second place team, Boros Aggro, and this is like the ones that were real successful at the Pro Tour, which are basically white weenie decks where red was coming out of the sideboard. But in this case, you do have 4 heroic reinforcements in the main. Other than that, it looks very similar to those decks we saw in the top 8 of the Pro Tour, Benalish Marshal kind of powering up those small creatures. Out of Guilds comes Hunted Witness, Venerated Loxodon, Conclave Tribunal, and Sacred Foundry. Sideboard brings us Experimental Frenzy. The third place team was playing a Boros Angels deck, even though these decks kind of fell off recently, but here's one doing well. And you're not probably unfamiliar with this deck list, although you may have forgotten it if you've just been looking at top 8s recently. 4 Rekindling Phoenix, 4 Resplendent Angels, 3 Aurelias in the main, 4 Lyras. You also get 4 History of Benalias in here. Let's look at the cards from Guilds. Aurelia, like we just mentioned, Lava Coil, Justice Strike, Boros Guild Gates here, and Sacred Foundry. Out of the sideboard, Legion Warboss, Deafening Clarion, and Conclave Tribunal. The 5th place team was running a variant of Selesnya tokens called Selesnya Aggro. You're not going to find March of the Multitudes here. You'll still find History of Benalia. You're still going to find Legion's Landings, just 2 of them though. But you do see some different creatures here, some bigger, more aggressive creatures as well. But let's take a look at the cards from Guilds here. Venerated Loxodon, Nullhide Ferrex, so a much bigger creature here. Amerisol the Accord, Flower and Flourish, Conclave Tribunal, and Temple Garden. In the sideboard, Knight of Autumn and Tristani Discordant. 6th place team brought us a big red deck, and that's actually kind of cool to see. We're used to seeing the more aggressive, small red creatures. Well, this one goes a little bit larger anyway. You're going to find your Goblin Chain Whirlers here, 4 of those. Some other aggressive creatures, though, of course, like 4 Firefleet Daredevil. That's pretty interesting. 4 Rekindling Phoenixes, again, a little bit bigger, but powerful all the same. This is also running 4 Treasure Maps. That's worth noting. In the main, you'll find Goblin Crater Maker from Guilds of Ravnica, Legion Warboss, and Lava Coil. No cards from Guilds, though, in the sideboard here. 7th place had Bant Nexus. Now, we saw a Jeskai Nexus deck do well last weekend. It is the end of this environment, so I don't think everyone's going to run out and try to build Nexus decks at this point or anything like that. But they've been kicking around. This one isn't that different from what we saw in the previous season. You have 2 Karns in this build, 4 Teferis, of course, is your win condition. And then you have a lot of your control cards, and of course 4 Nexus of Fate are in here. So nothing too unusual, but of course there are cards from Guilds that have made this deck a little bit better in some ways. Those cards are Chemister's Insight, Pause for Reflection, Discovery and Dispersal, and Temple Garden. Out of the sideboard, we had Amara, Soul of the Accord, and Knight of Autumn. 7th place team was also running Boros Aggro, but this is different than the other Boros Aggro deck. This isn't that white weenie deck with Benalish Marshal and a little red coming in. This does play more red, with Aurelia in there, Lava Coil, 4 heroic reinforcements like the previous deck though. This has 4 Legion's Landings, 4 History of Benalias. Let's take a closer look at the Guilds cards though. In the main, Venerated Loxodon, Aurelia of course, Boros Challenger here, Lava Coil like I mentioned, Conclave Tribunal, and Sacred Foundry. Out of the sideboard, 2 more copies of Lava Coil and Experimental Frenzy. Alright, that wraps up our look at the World Magic Cup, and, you know, it's interesting because Standard is coming to an end. I think this has been a very successful and diverse Standard environment. It's actually been pretty exciting to watch. We'll see what happens with the next environment. Hopefully that will continue. But it is good to look back at these decks one last time to know what's going forward into the new environment, especially when we start to look at the cards that are going to be previewed in the coming weeks from Ravnica Legions. So until next time, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible through the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page, as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.